don't know what you're talking about, and it's not going to work for me.
I'm unique and it's not going to work.
Right? And that's the miracle of this.
Welcome to Self-Made and Sober. I'm your host, Andrew Lassise with selfmade-coaching.com. And in this podcast, it's my job to interview people who are not only crushing it in business, but have also struggled with addiction in the past and are in long-term recovery. Be sure to join our Facebook group where we help entrepreneurs grow and scale their business at facebook.com/groups/SMC Mastermind, like Self-Made Coaching Mastermind. I hope you enjoy the show, and be sure to subscribe and rate the show afterwards so you can get notified each Friday when we put out a new episode. With me today is Tom Shanahan. Tom is the author of The Spiritual Adrenaline, and in this book, Tom goes through ways that you can stay sober, not just through recovery as most people know it, but also including diet, exercise, and a healthy lifestyle. Tom, so blessed to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Andrew, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. I congratulate you on this podcast and what you're doing to help spread the word about all these innovative people and programs and ideas that are available out there in the recovery world today. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, but I'm just the messenger, just trying not to carry mess anymore. So why don't you give us a little background on what it was like for Tom growing up and kind of what led to your demise, so to speak?
Sure. Well, and then my rebirth, right?
Oh, yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah, I don't want to give away the ending.
Yeah. I grew up here in New York City, and where I grew up here in the city, there's a lot of alcohol is a really important social component, if you will. And so when I was growing up, the adults, there was lots of drinking going on. My mom's not a big drinker. My father was a very big drinker from an Irish Catholic family. But so I was around a lot of drinking on both sides of my family. Then in the neighborhood, and the cool kids, like the cool teenagers, were the ones kind of sneaking off for keg parties, or maybe taking a bottle out of their parents' liquor cabinet, and we'd sneak it out into the woods, and we would drink that. And so I guess what I realize now is it just seemed like to be cool and to be in, if you will, with the cool kids, that was something that you did. And at high school, it really was. I mean, everything revolved in my high school around, I was on sports, I did soccer, and I also swam, was captain of the swim team. So I was very athletic. I was a lifeguard in the summer times as well for the National Park Service. So I was in great shape. But the social world of the lifeguards, the social world of the swim team and all that revolved around alcohol. So softball games we had, drinking was a big thing. And then in college, that's what I saw. That's what I knew. And then in college, I started to introduce more. I was in a fraternity. There was a lot more drugs that came in, like marijuana, then cocaine. It's the usual progression. I mean, there's nothing, unusual about the story, except that I was also in the closet, so that may have been some relevance there because I was always terrified of being found out, let's say, and I just, by fitting in, by doing the drugs and doing stupid things and, chasing after girls in college. So I was just one of the guys, and nobody really, that was not an issue. And then so all throughout my life, I've really always been working. I never was unemployed for really any period of time. Had some really, really prestigious, high-profile jobs. I guess people say, I don't like the term at all, but they say highly functional. They use that term. One of the consistent things is whether I was working in the private sector or in government. I worked in government a good part of my career. I was always kind of gravitate towards the drinkers, if you will. I wouldn't say the partiers, but the drinkers. And in politics, I think, quite frankly, part of the reason our country has so many issues is it's a completely dysfunctional environment. And you go to political fundraisers every night of the week, and there's so much drinking that goes on. It's really, when I think about it now, far removed, it's a real unhealthy environment, and there's a lot of dysfunction in it, and it all just feeds off of a lot of people drinking. I mean, you would just see it over and over. So what really finally brought the house of cards, because I think that as hard as I worked at work and as serious as I was about my career, I became a lawyer. It was built on a house of cards because I never really got rid of those personal demons like the drinking. The drugs went away as I got further along in my career, but not the drinking. But then in 2009, I was in a very high-profile job in government, and I was fired. I reported misconduct. The people they all left government, but it started a whole host of things happening. They're called whistleblower type situations. So 2 years later, after this extensive investigation, I was fired publicly, and it was humiliating, and it wasn't really fair, and that got me down. So I knew that could be an issue for me as far as drinking. I didn't want to go back to doing that. So I checked myself into this outpatient program to try and be, proactive, if you will. So I was in the outpatient program. I hadn't been drinking. I did go to see a therapist who prescribed 4 or 5 different types of anxiety medication, antidepressants, sleeping pills, all these different things. And up until that point, I had never taken anything but the occasional Xanax, to deal with stress at work. So I was on 5 different pills a day. So I was sober, all right? I wasn't drinking alcohol or doing coke, but I was taking all these pills, which made me feel really strange. And I was going to meetings in this outpatient program, but I didn't have a sponsor. Actually, I had a sponsor, but he never worked the steps, which made me very happy because I didn't want to work the steps. And, to me,
interesting choice.
It's very interesting. We say in a matrimonial law, a giraffe doesn't marry an elephant, right? You kind of look for
someone, he's got what you want and he hasn't worked the steps, and that's exactly what you want.
Exactly what I wanted. And so I had that. And, he really wasn't on my case. I would go to meetings. I would never share. I would text really throughout the meetings to see where I was going to go. And, I didn't change any of the people, places, and things that I was around. I had a lot of, and they're still my friends to this day, but I just don't do the same things. I would go with them to nightclubs and to bars, and they would get completely sloshed and completely messed up. And I'd be like the sober guy, right, hanging in this crazy environment with people who are doing crazy things and doing drugs and whatever. And so I realize now, that's not sober behavior, but at that time, to me, it was. And the point I'm trying to make is I wasn't willing to change those things. And then after I got terminated, I was not drinking, I was not doing drugs, but I was on all these pills that the therapist gave me. A whole bunch of things happened, right one after the other. In January 2010, my good friend, whose office is right next door to mine even today, she was my first boss as a lawyer. Her son was paralyzed from the neck down in a snowboard accident. So immediately she wanted to go help him with his recovery. And I said, I'll cover your law practice. So I was covering her law practice, and I was covering my own law practice, which was in and of itself very difficult. But I wanted to do that for her because we had been friends for years, and we still are today. So she left, and I was doing two law practices, running hers and mine. And then my brother was paralyzed from the neck down on March 6th of 2010. But I know, what are the odds of that? But 2 months later, he was paralyzed from the neck down. He has 3 kids, but they really couldn't handle the catastrophic nature of his accident. And so I became his healthcare proxy. I was his trustee, his power of attorney. I was involved in making major decisions on a daily basis for his healthcare and his finances all of a sudden. So I now had that new responsibility, and he lived in Portland, Maine. So I was flying back and forth all the time. And then also to Shepherd Center, which is a spinal cord injury hospital in Atlanta, in addition to running 2 law practices, taking all these prescription medications and all that kind of stuff. And so, my plate was really full. And then 2 months after that, out of nowhere, my mom's never been sick in her entire life. I can't remember her even having a cold. She was diagnosed with throat cancer. And at the time, I had 3 young nieces and nephews, my sister's kids. And she was so busy with the kids, she really couldn't participate in taking my mom to chemo and radiation. And so the reality of the situation was I was running my practice, running my friend's practice, flying all over the place to try and help my brother get into these hospitals and succeed in his rehab. And then going back and forth from Albany, New York to New York City to take mom to chemo, drive up, come back. It was just not sustainable. And so I wound up leaving the outpatient program. I stopped going to meetings. And I hated the way I felt because of the antidepressants and all. So I just got off all of it. I was like, fuck it. But the problem with that is I really had a difficult time functioning. And so I wound up getting cocaine, and I started to use the cocaine just to get through the day. What's really weird is I drank my whole life, and I did cocaine like after getting drunk. I do the coke to keep it going, if you will. But what really morphed for me when I shouldn't have really gotten off the antidepressants right like cold turkey, but I did, was I needed the cocaine to function. And then I needed the alcohol to help bring me back down because I couldn't sleep. I mean, it was just insane. And, I was doing it every day, and it was just a mess. And I was putting the cocaine on my gum here so that if I went to court, I could do it at court. I'm being very honest. I could do it walking on the streets in Manhattan. I wouldn't have to go in a bathroom. It was really bad. My gum was bleeding. I was smoking a couple of packs of cigarettes a day, and my lungs, if I would walk just from a city block, I would wheeze. And I'm still trying to carry out and help everybody and do all these different things. And I was a complete mess. My finances were a disaster. I never sent bills out at the office, so I had no money. It was just a total nightmare. And quite frankly, we came crashing down because, what they say is true, that eventually it stops working, and eventually the coke stopped working, and eventually the alcohol stopped working. And so Cindy, whose son was paralyzed, came back after a year and realized I was kind of really a mess, and she started talking to me about, I didn't realize what was going on with you. You really should take some time off, and so, and then my family and everybody, it just wasn't a workable situation. I think people started to see that things had gotten really, really bad. So I wound up going into inpatient rehab. I was actually really thrilled to be there because I knew I had I don't know if it's overdosed, I wouldn't really, but I repeatedly was returning to the hospital because of what I thought were heart attacks or stress or strokes, but they were really major anxiety attacks. And what they really were was I wasn't eating food. I would go for days without eating food. It was all cocaine and alcohol and cigarettes. I was so broke at the end because I wasn't even functioning. My business was going down tubes. I would count the change and come up with enough change to go buy a pack of cigarettes instead of buying food. These are nothing unique here, but it's really pathetic. And then when I ran out of money to buy cigarettes, when I would walk along the sidewalks, if I saw a half-smoked cigarette, I'd pick it up and finish smoking. That's how gross it was. So when I went into rehab, I had bleeding gum. I was 140 pounds, and I was really sick, to be honest with you. And when I tried to get to rehab, I had to go to a cardiac unit by ambulance on the way to the rehab. And the rehab almost didn't take me because they're like, you may be too sick to come here. We don't really handle those kinds of methods.
That's pretty bad when the rehab center says you might be a little too sick for this place.
Not a medical rehab. We're not equipped to provide the kind of, I had issues breathing. And it was really bad. And so, behind me on the wall is a picture of me at the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. And one of the other pictures is me at Mount Everest Base Camp. So these are all places I've hiked in sobriety. And I say that because the body has an amazing capacity to heal, and it can take a lot of abuse. And I'm here to tell you that's true. But at that time, I was pretty, beaten up and worn down. I went in at 140 pounds. And so when I got into rehab, because I understood how not to do things right in the context of a 12-step approach to recovery, I committed. I said, I'm really glad I'm here because it got me out of this insane world I was living in. And you know what? It forced other people in my family to take responsibility, like my brother's children actually do something for their father. And for other people, my sister's wonderful, but to play a more active role with my mom. And then but in rehab, I decided I wanted to really work the steps. They said, you can work step 1, that's it. I said, no, I want to work all 12.
My situation's different.
Yeah, exactly. And they said, you can't do that. I said, well, I'm going to try. But, the point is, I did all these things. Instead of fighting everything, I did it. I wrote amends letters. And then on Sunday mornings, there was this gentleman named Reverend Vern Milken who comes into the facility and gives this really, really fun, powerful sermon. It's a multi-denominational sermon, so it's not anything specific. But, most of the people, it was optional whether to sleep in or whether to go. And so I just decided I'm going to go. What do I have to lose? I want to do everything. It was like an eye-opening experience. Like, he's a good friend of mine till today. He got me really thinking about spirituality and just about faith in ways I hadn't previously thought about. And so I say this because it was like such a major, it's these little decisions that we make along the way in recovery that may seem like completely inconsequential, right? At the time we make them, but they have profound change in our life. And we look back and go, thank God I did that. Like, wow. And so that for me was like that kind of getting up on Sunday, enjoying that experience, and really starting to think about a positive role for spirituality and faith was a great thing for me. And then I took a year off after I got out from my law practice. I worked part-time, and I went to 3 hospitals, 3 spinal cord injury hospitals with my brother. I went to Baltimore, Johns Hopkins, Shepherd Center in Atlanta, and Kessler, which is over in New Jersey, not far from New York City, and to give them every opportunity to recover, which, I wanted to do that. That's what I really wanted to do. And I also went to meetings. I had a sponsor. I started to really enjoy being in recovery. But what I started to realize was I went into rehab at 140. I came out at 177. I was smoking more cigarettes in recovery than I was at the end of my days in active addiction. I would go to a meeting, I'd be with the smokers outside, go into the meeting, drink a lot of coffee with, the sugar and cookies and those kinds of things, take my cigarette break during the 7th tradition, and then, come back in. And I was living I started to realize I was putting a lot of weight on. The smoking got worse. I just felt terrible. Mentally, I felt like the steps in the program were really, really doing what they had. I understood now what they had the potential to do if you seriously followed the recommendations. However, I was really becoming confused with the lifestyle I saw around that had kind of emerged around 12-step meetings. I'm speaking for myself and from my observations, the amount of smoking that was going on, the amount of coffee, like even in the evenings at late meeting, and then the late night diner food and all that kind of stuff. And I started to think to myself, this is kind of inconsistent with what we're talking about in the meetings. And I don't mean that as an attack on the program. I don't mean that in a negative or judgmental way. Every meeting is different, but that's my observation. And so I became concerned about that. So the gentleman who was my sponsor back then, he also kind of had that same experience. He was a personal trainer at the gym. So he got me into thinking about, well, maybe recovery is more than just the more traditional approach to the steps and quote unquote the recovery community. Maybe it has a physical component that you can implement in the context of how much exercise you're getting and what you're eating that can really, really help you beyond what is more traditional in 12-step growth. And so when I started to change up my diet, when I started to exercise, and you start to promote these positive endorphins in your head being produced, it's the same high you get like from alcohol or drugs, but it's like from clean living and from your body feeling good and naturally producing those feel-good hormones. I'm like, there is something to this. And of course, as every alcoholic or addict is aware, we go to extremes, right? So yeah. I wanted to really understand it. So I became a certified personal trainer. I went to nutrition school and I got an advanced nutrition certification. That's my sports nutrition certification. And I continue to take advanced level nutrition courses even till today. And I read everything I can possibly read. And there was no resource when I was getting sober and I started to have the epiphany that the steps traditionally help mental wellness in the context of addiction recovery, but there was really no lifestyle that had developed that I felt was a lifestyle that could be consistent. I wanted to create one. And there was no books out there. There was no book where one person could buy it and get the basic nutrition and the basic exercise information they needed so that they could apply it in their life. And so since not everyone has access to personal trainers or has the money to pay people, a nutritionist or all that, I wanted to create a one-stop shop for people like me who understood that these traditional outside issues were actually really critically important in a 12-step or other approach to recovery, And so that's when I started writing the book. And that was back in 2012. And it was published in 2019.
Wow. So when you were writing this book, was this just sort of Tom's experience, or were you actually doing research behind all this? What was kind of the background of it?
Very good question. Let me just tell you, when I first started writing the book, I was chain smoking cigarettes. As I would sit in my apartment and smoke and smoke and smoke, right? And write and write. And then the epiphany came. I said, "You're a hypocrite. You're writing a book about a healthy lifestyle and sobriety, and you're like, you can't stop smoking." So I actually stopped writing the book because I said, "There's enough hypocrites and BS artists out there. I don't want to be another one." And I said, "Until you deal with your smoking issue, you are not qualified to write the book." So I actually stopped writing the book. And then, it's a whole separate story about how I was able to quit smoking. I have 8 years, by the way, this May 11th, without alcohol or drugs. And I'll have 6 years without cigarette smoking on September 27th of this year.
That's
so
great
I'm really,
that you've got
really
both.
Excited. So I was able to quit 6 years ago. I picked up the book again, and I started to continue writing the book because I felt at that point I was actually qualified. I wasn't controlled by any substance because cigarettes and nicotine, they are, I think, the most addictive of all. And so one other thing that I think is really important for people to understand is I read a lot of things online, and then I bought some self-published books, and there were some really wonderful self-published books out there. But there are some really bad ones too. And I don't mean bad in the context of what necessarily they're saying, but in the context of they have conclusions in them without any real scientific basis. I would read something about the vitamin cure to alcoholism, like they give people a lot of hope. And then I would read, it's the author's subjective opinion about what they think. And they're not always qualified to give that opinion. And so when I wrote the book, I said, I want to give people something that when they read it, it's evidence-based, based on peer-reviewed studies. Now, I'm an attorney, so I understand how important it is to cite to the law and the precedent to support your proposition in court. So I wanted people, when they read my book, if they disagree with one of the conclusions in my book, that they could go to the actual source that I relied on, and they could say, you're wrong, or, you're right, or whatever. But at least they would have the science. I would have the science to back it up, and they can investigate it. So my book is, every chapter has chapter notes, and it's evidence-based. But I wanted people to have the comfort level that it's not my subjective opinion, that this is science and it's based on evidence. So what I write about can not just help me, but it can help them. And that's what I went about doing, and that's what spiritual adrenaline is all about. Let me say, too, I'm a big fan of the 12 steps, but I'm also a realist in the world. For example, when I went to Stepping Stones, which is the home of Bill W. and his wife, one of the things that really stood out to me was the actual desk where he wrote the big book. It's amazing. You walk into his writing studio and you see the actual desk where it was written. And it was profoundly moving to me. But what I also noticed all around the edge of the desk are cigarette burns, because he didn't use an ashtray. What Bill Wilson did would lay his cigarette off the edge of the desk and they would burn, So all around the desk, and you see the burns. And I was smoking at that time, It just struck me, and I knew he died of emphysema, and they put him in the bariatric chamber down in Florida and all these things. So I pointed out because, I think it's important to understand that whether it be cigarettes, whether it be overeating on carbohydrates, they're all substances. And we can't judge which ones are okay and which ones are less dangerous. We have to understand that they all can kill us and they're all addictive. And so with that being said, that was my experience. And I saw that desk and I said to myself, a lot of people, still don't understand like that. So I wanted to make sure I incorporated the nicotine issue in the book, and it is. But also, I was very interested to understand the history of the 12 steps. So I got access to the AA's library here in New York City, their world headquarters, the research library, and also Stepping Stones, where Bill Wilson lived, to their materials. And what was really interesting to me was I started to learn how the early founders, including Dr. Silkworth, and, you know, I say AA because I'm talking about the beginnings of the program, right? So this is applicable to all 12-step programs. And obviously now there's so many fellowships, right?
Right.
But the
You're talking
genesis
about the foundation of all of them was
right.
AA and Bill Wilson.
And that experience in the beginning.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Now it's much broader than that.
We're talking 12-step recovery. Perfect.
Right. I found that they would keep track of what people ate back in the 1930s to try and ascertain whether or not there was a link between people who were relapsing consistently and what they were eating versus people who were able to address their cravings and remain sober. And they had a list of foods. They had come up with a list of foods, and it's in my book, that people who were constantly relapsing tended to go to. And so Dr. Silkworth wrote about this. He called them the sister foods to alcohol. And the sister foods are French fries, white rice, starchy foods, basically foods that are chemically similar to alcohol in the sense that they have no nutritional value whatsoever, but they have a lot of calories and they prompt endorphin production. So way back in the day, we're talking about those things. So that was really something that was important to me to realize. And then also there was a whole host of research on supplements and vitamins and nutrition. And actually, Bill Wilson put out 2 pamphlets on niacin and his experiments with niacin and how niacin could be helpful because he suffered from lifetime depression. And so there was a whole bunch of research that had been done by him and some other people. Dr. Abraham Hoffer was another one who he worked very closely with on the issue of supplementation with vitamins and all that. And then Dr. Bob also had written about and recommended activity, physical activity for people in recovery to help promote the reduction in cravings and to enable people to stay sober. So no matter what fellowship it is, though, there's this term called outside issues. And so I had a very hard time in the beginning when I was researching the book and trying to get people to speak to me or get comments, because like what we're looking at, what I was interested in are quote unquote the outside issues, right? But I think that if you read the book and you see the people who are participating in the book and every chapter tells a story of somebody in recovery, many of them come from different fellowships. Some of them don't necessarily follow a 12-step approach, although that's what I follow. They believe in it, but they have their own kind of a sober, active approach to it. But consistently, these are all people who share one commonality with my belief system. And that is that the quote-unquote, what people refer to as outside issues, they matter. They do matter. The lifestyle issues, I think at the end of the day, like I talked about my experience the first time in the program, I didn't want to change the people, places, and things. These things matter. They matter big time. And so my book gets into why. I'm not lecturing people for the sake of lecturing. I get into the science about why it matters. Everything is peer-reviewed and based on research that's credible research specific to the addiction recovery movement. And I'll tell you, I think the research is wonderful because I know so many people who say, for example, that I've done so much damage to my body that I'm never going to be the same. So why should I even bother? And the reality is most of the diseases that are prevalent in the addiction recovery community are lifestyle diseases that get better if you abstain from the substance, take good care, physically and mentally. For example, I'll take like liver disease, which is common, that the liver can regenerate tissue and it can heal. Type 2 diabetes. People, not everybody, depends on the extent of the disease, but many people who now have type 2 diabetes, 6 months on a specific dietary program with additional exercise, and they will no longer have type 2 diabetes. And then there was a very important study that came out it's in my book, but it came out not long before my book was published, that studied the brains of people who were in inpatient methamphetamine recovery. We took one group, they had a control group, and then the actual group that was exercising. The exercise group was about 10 people. They did brisk walking. They combined a little bit of weight training with brisk walking on a daily basis. The other group were allowed to just, couch potato, veg it out, and watch videos on the importance of exercise. They did PET scans of the brain both before and after of all the participants in both groups, and I think it was a 12-week period. The group that actually participated in the exercise after the 12 weeks had an increase of 16% in dopamine receptors in the brain. The couch potatoes who didn't exercise or watch the videos had an increase of 4%, and that, of course, involves also abstaining from the substance. But the point is, think about that. You can rewire your brain. You can take it back. You can change the negative thinking, and you can empower your brain to start producing dopamine and the feel-good hormones by taking care of your physical body. And what's so great about the 12 steps is this one individual, only one doctor, he's down at NYU. He's the only one who's done this to date. And I follow him. I'm a big fan. I write him letters. I think he thinks I'm crazy because I think I'm a big fan of his. But he's the first doctor who's done MRIs on the brain of people who participate in 12-step programs. And what they've been doing down at NYU is they will either do an MRI scan of the brain prior to a 12-step meeting and then after, or in a controlled setting, they bring in people who are part of a 12-step community and they repeat slogans and other kind of familiar things from the meetings to try and recreate like a meeting environment, and they scan the brain. The brain activity shows in the regions that are responsible for releasing dopamine that these people are having the same experience. In other words, the parts of their brain that are the positive reward systems are working in the context of either going to a meeting or participating like the slogan. So we're starting to understand why it is scientifically the 12 steps work for people who, as they say at meetings, people who work here. So, we're starting to get a view into the brain. And so when you look at the science now that says, we know now as a fact that your attendance at 12-step meetings, your participation in the program is going to prompt the production of dopamine and other feel-good hormones in what they refer to as the reward center of the brain. And we know as a fact that if you eat right, you're increasing your body's ability to create those positive, the enzymes that are in the food are really important for the body's ability to create the hormones. So if you're eating right, you're helping your brain, you're helping your body create those positive hormones. And if you're exercising rather than lying around feeling sorry for yourself, you're enhancing the body's ability. So why would anyone? One of the important things that people told me at the beginning was it's important to be open-minded and willing. So anyone listening out there who thinks I'm full of it or something we're not going to work for them, give it a month. Be open-minded and willing, and just go to my website. Go get a copy of my book. It costs less than a pack of cigarettes. On Amazon, I think they sell it for $12. I think you get the audio version or the digital version even less, okay? But the point is, give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, if you fundamentally believe these are outside issues and they shouldn't be discussed in the context of 12 steps, try it for a week or a month and see how you feel. And if it's not working for you, leave it alone and go back to whatever it was that's working for you. But I just think that this is an incredibly important message for people in recovery. And I just don't think, as much as things are changing and people are starting to embrace more in the recovery community, the message of science and the importance of a lifestyle that's consistent with the traditional 12-step approach, there's a lot of opposition to it. And I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I'm just, by nature of, I don't know if it's how I was raised or just in general, I question why things work the way they do. And one of the overwhelming things in 12-step recovery, they say, well, you don't question why a light bulb turns on when you flip the light switch. Like, just accept it. Like, you flip the light switch, the light turns on. You don't need to understand electricity and all that stuff. Like, just accept it for what it is. And For some things, I'm like the light bulb example, and I think it probably came to mind because this morning at 5:30 a.m. I tried changing a light bulb in our laundry room, and it's an electrical problem. So maybe that's so subconsciously I'm having issues with electricity at the moment. But I wanted to understand because, I'm attending 12-step meetings. I used to be a blackout drinker every single night. And now all of a sudden this program, which I was positive 12-step recovery wouldn't work for me. And in order to prove that it didn't work, I did it 100% to the best of my ability. And 6 years later, relapse hasn't been part of my story because the actions have netted me the results that were promised. But my brain kind of operates in, okay, how does this work? Why does this work? And just the usual rebuttal, you don't need to understand it. You just keep doing it. Like, you're getting the results. Who cares? And it's like, that's kind of how Bernie Madoff got away with his Ponzi scheme.
You're right. You're right.
You don't question it. Just accept that it's working, which, I mean, it's a different circumstance, but I still questioned what it is. And I'm not a doctor, psychologist, don't claim to be one, but a lot of the things that I've put together is when you're helping other people, which is part of the 12-step recovery, when you're helping other people, you're getting outside of yourself and you're not focusing on the person who is all of the issues. Not only that, but if it's someone else who's been in a spot that you used to be in, like they say, the alcoholics are the only kind of people that'll dig a hole and then they'll just decorate it and hang up pictures and say they like it. But a recovered alcoholic will jump in there and say, look, I've been in this hole. Here's the way out. You don't have to be hanging these pictures. But it was strange to me that I'm just helping people and I'm incorporating prayer and meditation. And recently, in the last year and a half, I've been paying attention to the things that I put in my body. So that's why it's cool having you on the show and hearing your perspective, because I mean, just selfishly, these are things that I am personally interested in. So it's like, oh, hey, I get to hear someone that literally speaks the exact thing that I want to hear. But I think it's important to understand that it's not going to happen through osmosis. You're not going to get healthy by just showing up to the gym. You have to use the equipment, work with a trainer, have the correct diet. If you want to be spiritually fit, you can't just show up at a 12-step meeting and expect things to magically get better. And when I'm doing business coaching, it's the same thing. Just because you hired a coach doesn't mean your business is going to get any better. There's a lot of work that has to go into it that you have to own. So I think what you're doing is just really cool, because it's not just the simple answer. Don't question why it works. Just keep living your life.
Can I just add to that, Andrew, because I think it's a very important point. Let me say this. In the book, I have a chapter where I talk about, it's towards the end, and I write about this researcher in Italy who's doing research on shock treatment to the brain, and what he's trying to do with the frontal lobe. Like, he's trying to come up with a way that someone who is an alcoholic or an addict can go in for occasional shock, and it would prompt the production of the good hormones. And what I'm trying to say to you is this, okay? To me, you can do all the same things by going to 12-step meetings now, by eating right, and by exercising. You don't need Frankenstein. We don't need these doctors' help to create new ways to fry your brain. But I also say this because I agree with, obviously I agree with what you just said. And what I'm frustrated about, and I mentioned to you earlier in my story, so when I went to that therapist way back when, I said I'm depressed, I was depressed about everything. Never once was I asked, what are you eating? How much exercise do you get? Like, where are you spending your time? In 15 minutes, I had a prescription. I'm not exaggerating. This is a very important issue. 15 minutes, 5 prescriptions, the first time I ever met him, okay? There's a predisposition in the recovery community. I think it's because the pharmaceutical industry is a big industry. There's a lot of money being made off relapse, not a lot of money being made off sobriety, right? But most therapists won't say to their client, okay, well, what are you eating? Okay, how much sleep are you getting? Okay, like, these are all really important questions. And like when someone's depressed and they have a history of alcoholism, part of what causes depression can be compromised liver function. If you have a liver that's, fatty liver disease, you have some kind of disease issue, it's functioning, but it's not functioning well necessarily because of the history of the alcoholism. That's a major cause of depression, whether we realize it or not, because it saps the body's ability to metabolize nutrients for energy. Before they prescribe the prescription medication, do they run a blood test to check what the liver enzymes levels are? Most of the time they don't. And I just say this because, look, this is what I think is critical. And when I do my presentation out publicly, I say it over and over. We are not bobbleheads. So it's like there's this whole bobblehead approach to addiction recovery. We're going to treat the brain, therapy, and medications and prescription medications, and we're going to just pretend like everything below the neck isn't there. They can sit around all day. They can eat pizza 24/7. And they can sit on their couch on a beautiful day out and just sit there and watch ID channel, which I happen to love. It's all murders and bad stuff happening. I love it. I do. I admit it. But what I'm trying to say to you is those are environmental factors. And there's no amount of prescription medication that is going to address that kind of behavior and that kind of lifestyle. Like you said, if you want it, you have to work for it. And I like what you said, because I was a skeptic too. And it's funny how we both were skeptics. Now I wrote a book and you have this show, right?
Yeah, okay, I'm sold.
You did exactly what I did. I tried it my way once, right? And that didn't work. So you did what I did. It's the same experience, only said in different words. So you said, okay, basically, F you, I'll try everything you say, because I'm going to show you that you don't know what you're talking about, and it's not going to work for me.
I'm unique, and it's not going to work.
Happen, right?
Exactly.
Right? And that's the miracle of this. I mean, there's a science to it, but there's a miracle that happens as well. And so, like, you're an example of that miracle. Your baby, your beautiful photos on Facebook of your family and your wife, and all the nice things happening, those are miracles, And I see miracles all the time. And so those miracles take work. They don't just happen.
One of the conclusions I've kind of come to in the last couple months, and I mean, it's an obvious one, but I don't think that there's enough awareness about it. But this explains why pharma and all these things are so big, is that we love to just treat symptoms. Most people aren't going to go to the doctor unless there's a symptom. So the whole alcoholism and drug addiction, that's a symptom of a different problem. So what they're hoping for is just a pill to stop that symptom from occurring. It's not the reason that causes you to have to drink or do drugs. We're usually not treating that. And that's a lot of what 12-step is getting to the source of the person so that you don't have to treat how you feel with drugs and alcohol, because the symptom no longer exists as a result of correct living. And what you're saying with the therapist, it's a perfect analogy to it. She had a list of, you gave her 5 symptoms. She gave you 5 pills to get rid of the symptoms. And what you discovered is when you're eating healthy and exercising, those symptoms disappear on their own and you're healthier. And I'm assuming you're happier. You are personally are happier with a healthy lifestyle versus the other one that you had.
Absolutely. And I think the reason, I know, the reason I wrote the book was because spiritual adrenaline, was because I wanted to share that gift, because I know this is a simple solution to a complicated problem. You've heard that line before. I'm not co-opted by the pharmaceutical companies or the big rehab companies that make a lot of money off, frequent flyers, okay? And I'm not being critical, and there are wonderful facilities out there. But what I'm saying is, this is a very simple message, and it's a very common sense message. And for some reason, There's no book out there that addressed these issues. Not one. And I'm telling you, the last book was Eating Right to Live Sober, that was written in 1986. It was more of a academic text about the issue. This is common sense. And this is an important message, because whether or not you abstain from a substance, there's a big difference between abstention and sobriety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sobriety brings happiness. Sobriety brings, like you've experienced, a family and all kinds of different gifts that otherwise wouldn't happen. You have the option. You could have gone the other direction, right? You could have abstained and be sitting in your house alone with all the drapes drawn, right? Watching the ID channel, eating, endless like processed foods and pizzas. But I hate my life. Why doesn't anyone want to be with me? But I'm just saying, like, that, I think we say white knuckling it. And there's so much information out there. And by the way, I haven't really talked about it today. There's an entire movement called the Sober Active Movement. Organizations like the Phoenix, which is the largest and was the first, founded by Scott Strode. It's like in 13, 14 states now. Addict to Athlete by Rob and Sheena Archuleta in 2 or 3 states now. Temperance Training down in Timmy Mustian. Rob Parker, Anthony Fazio, right in your neck of the woods down in Florida. Caleb McCoy, he's on the Eastern Band of Cherokee Reservation in North Carolina. And he just got married to Caitlin Ledford. They hated each other in active addiction. They became fiancés and dated for years now in active recovery, and they just got married this weekend. And Caleb ran 777 miles last year along the Trail of Tears. He's a Cherokee, and he wanted to do this to raise awareness of the current epidemic of drug addiction in the Cherokee Nation in North Carolina. So he ran 777 miles. It's unbelievable stuff happening. There's Rockcovery Fitness in upstate New York. There's Ignite Fitness in Wisconsin. There's Rise and Grind, which is a specific program for women. What they work on is specifically for women who are opiate addicts or meth addicts. They only accept women. They have a sober house just for them. They have to work out twice a week at 6 a.m. at American Fitness Gym. They take them shopping to teach them how to buy healthy foods. They help them buy appropriate clothes and learn interview techniques, because they recognize that women in recovery have specific needs that men don't, and have a much higher relapse rate based upon a lot of the issues that are out there. And they have a huge success rate. And when they graduate the program, they get a free membership in American Fitness Gym. So I'm just saying, like, this is a really, really exciting. I get really emotional when I talk about it, because I know all these people. There's Garrett McCormick, who's in Cork, Ireland. He has an organization. He was a mixed martial artist, and now he's become a Buddhist. And he has a meditation practice, and he goes around Ireland and works with kids and teaching them. He was someone who's very out about, he wanted to commit suicide, and he said it's okay not to be okay. And he goes around the country. They had him on like a national show recently in Ireland, and it's just like amazing gifts, amazing things are happening now. It's a great time to be in recovery. I think it's like so exciting, and I just feel like God has his reasons for everything, and I was meant to be here, meant to be doing this right now. And I really think the contents of my book, and I'm not just saying this because I wrote the book, but the contents of my book were a gift given to me by God, and it's my responsibility to share it with other people.
Yeah, and I reference it a lot on the show, but the mentality of being a river versus a reservoir. So God puts these things in your life, and you don't just hold on to them and give them out in case of emergency. Here you go, I'll give you some of this. But the information comes to you, flows through you, and continues to provide to other people. And all you're doing is just creating a platform to be able to get your message to other people. So one of the things I did want to touch on before we wrap up, why don't you talk about the Inca Trail trip?
I like to do things that are consistent with my sobriety. Like, for example, because I like to surf, but I wasn't able to surf at the end because of my smoking. So I went to Costa Rica 1 year to celebrate my first year without cigarettes. I did a surfing and yoga trip to Costa Rica. And so I try and do like vacations that are kind of consistent, like up on the wall behind me. There's me on Kilimanjaro when I summited Kilimanjaro. And then also in October, I was at the Mount Everest Base Camp. I did the hike up there. I like to do those things because they're consistent. They challenge me to step out of my comfort zone, and they remind me how grateful I should be for my health and my lungs and my body and my ability to do these things. And so I love yoga and I do yoga, but all I could find for people in recovery were yoga retreats. And so, I like adventurous things. I like to go hiking and all the rest. So I created Spiritual Adrenaline Adventures. And our first adventure is going to be this September to Banff National Park in the Canadian Rockies. I'm going to take people up on, and this is not a technical climb, it's a beginner's climb, but we're going to go up on a glacier in Banff National Park. And it's the most, if you haven't heard of Banff, it's unreal. It's surreally beautiful, and it's not crowded like the American Rockies. It's right above the border, and it's well known. The water there is crystal clear, aqua blue. There's still huge, massive glaciers. And so I'm leading a 4-day hike up around the glaciers and into the park, and that's in September. And then in April of 2020, I'm leading a sober hike to the Inca Trail from Cusco up to Machu Picchu. And, I designed the trip, but all these trips are designed by me and the local guides. And so we're going to have 12-step meetings, and it's all in the itinerary on on my website, spiritualadrenaline.com, on the adventures page. So I designed the itinerary. Like when we get to Lima, the first thing we're going to be doing is going to an actual 12-step meeting in the Anglican Cathedral in Lima. We're going to have meetings up on the trail, like at sunset, up on the Inca Trail. It's going to be phenomenal. I'm going to be doing some meditation practice with people, like walking meditations as we're heading up. And all the food is consistent because they usually give junk to the tourists. So I actually went through the menus with our local guides, and we have healthy foods. So that'll be in April of 2020. And then in July, it's called Paddleboard Yoga. It's in the Azores. And what it is basically yoga out on paddle boards on the Azore Mountains. It's spectacular. And here's what the really cool thing is. The Azores are not really developed yet, so we're going to do the paddleboard yoga out off in the water. We're going to be doing hiking. There's like a volcano and beautiful places to hike there. It's spectacular. And I'm going to be putting up videos because I was there last summer laying out the itinerary for every day. But here's where it just gets completely killer. Completely killer. We're going to do the running of the bulls. They have various towns there. And in the summer, in July, each town does their own running of the bull at a different weekend. So it's going to be time. So anybody who comes, they don't have to run with the bulls if they don't want to run with the bulls. But I want to run with the bulls. I'm telling you right now.
I was thinking, I know this is an obvious question, but you are opting into running with the bulls, right?
I'm 100%. Think about that.
There's one thing I know about Tom. He's running with the bulls.
I'm running with the bulls. Let me say something to you. So for that person maybe who's out there listening to our conversation today or says, I don't want to stay. Sobriety is boring. Come with me and run with the bulls, or go check out like one of these sober active communities that I just mentioned, and then come back to me and tell me that sobriety is boring.
Yeah.
It is the best gift that I've been given. And I know that's true for you. I can see it in your eyes as we're having this conversation. You're not doing this because you have nothing better to do. I know you do. You're doing this because it's a gift. And so for those people out there who think their life is over, maybe you're a newcomer, you're never going to have fun again, never going to do stuff, hang out with me, hang out with Andrew, and I think that you may find out that life is just beginning in ways that you had not foreseen.
My lawyer literally, when I got my DUI in 2013, and I mean, it's one of those things you look back on, and it's just one of those moments that at the time seemed not important at all. And then looking back on it, it's just like, wow. But this guy, his name is Gil Cochran, and he was like the go-to DUI lawyer in Annapolis, Maryland, because all my friends had DUIs too. So everyone was like, you got to talk to Gil. He's the best. And so when I went there, he had said to me, do you think you have a drinking problem? And I was like, well, I blew a .24, so I don't know. And I had done those tests where it's like, if you say yes to 3 of these, you may have a drinking problem. And it's like, do you drink more than 3 times a week? And it's like, well, duh. Do you drink more than 5 beverages when you drink? Yeah, duh, of course. Like none of these, why are these even questioned? Doesn't everyone live this way? But I looked at him and I said yes. I didn't really think that I did have a problem at the time, but I said yes. And he said his game plan was, we'll put a breathalyzer in your car before court so we can show them that this was a one-time thing, which super backfired because I gave myself 3 more DUIs before court. Oh. So it was a huge backfire, and I needed those to happen in order to get where I'm at now. But he had said to me, it's not the stopping of drinking, it's the starting of living. And where I was at the time, I had zero faith in anything recovery related. I didn't believe anything that he was telling me. It just sounded like, just a sales pitch. You say, oh, it's not the stopping of drinking, it's the starting of living. But as far as I was concerned, everything that I did revolved around that. So it wasn't, let's go to the hockey game and let's drink there. Let's black out at the hockey game. Let's go bowling. Yeah, let's black out when we go bowling. Let's go to a football game. Yeah, let's black out at the football game. So everything that I did, it revolved around that. And once I got into recovery and I met people, because I feel like some people kind of have that idea that they're the only ones who feel this way and that nobody else understands. And when I got into 12-step recovery, and I heard people telling my story and they felt the way that I felt, I started getting little glimpses of maybe this might work for me if it worked for him, because it sounds like he knows what I'm feeling, and he may have the actual solution. So I think it kind of, once I came in, I was I was closed-minded to the fact that it could work, but I was willing to prove that it was wrong. But because of that willingness, and you start meeting other people, hearing other stories, and you see the results in their life, and it's like, you know what? Maybe sobriety's not the worst thing that could happen to me. And now, 6 years later, easily best thing that ever happened. You talked to me January 25th, 2013, when I got my DUI, worst day of my life, easily. You ask me now, 6 years later, best day of my life, January 25th, 2013, when everything came crashing down and I had to make a difference. Something had to change.
Well, you are an example of, as they say, the power of the program, right? I think they're kind of cliches, but they're also kind of true, right? Meeting makers.
Well, people wouldn't keep saying them if they weren't true. People would stop saying them. There aren't cliches that you get healthy by eating potato chips. Like, no one's preaching that.
That's true. So it is. I think we're both living proof, and we can do so much. We can share our stories, but we talked about that light bulb earlier. The light bulb has to go off in people's heads, and it's really just up to them to enable it, to give it the chance to light up brightly. It really is. You did it. I did it. Sometimes we both did it kind of kicking and screaming, right? But
I didn't say that this was fun.
It's not fun. It's so funny though. It's not fun at the time, but when you look back at it now, it actually was a fun period in the sense of the growth and the new experiences and all. It was a lot of really good times, but it was tough.
It brings you to another level. And I think that's one of the huge things, is that it brings you to another level. You have another level of consciousness. And we're running a little short on time. I could go on with you for hours, Tom. But for people that want to find you online, tell them about your group. Tell them where they can find your book. We'll have links in the show notes to everything.
Sure. So my website is www.spiritualadrenaline.com. If you're interested in the trips we discussed, you can go to the adventures page. I have a YouTube channel. It doesn't cost anything. You can just do the search for Spiritual Adrenaline. We have over 250 videos on all kinds of topics. I have a Facebook page. Just do the search, Spiritual Adrenaline. We have about 80,000 members of that page. And we get about 20,000 people, between 20 this depends on the week, 20 to 25, 27,000 people actually look at the videos and all the rest. So it's a big community of people there. And then I have a smaller active, sober community page. About 1,000 people participate. And that's where people can actually post about what they're doing and ask questions and look for support from people that are living the same kind of lifestyle. And what's really cool too is if you go to my site, I don't just promote Tom and Spiritual Adrenaline. If you go to my Instagram site, which is also Spiritual Adrenaline, or Facebook, you're going to learn all the groups I talked about earlier, Addict to Athlete, the Phoenix, and all the other people that are doing amazing things all around the world in the sober active movement.
That's so great. Tom, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Andrew. Keep up what you're doing. I'm really excited. And thank you for having me. I sincerely appreciate it.
Definitely. And guys, if you liked the episode, definitely check out Tom's book. Definitely join the groups. Strongly recommend anything that this guy is doing. Continue to follow his path. You know, the greatest way to success is you follow the winners. He is living proof. And if you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, put comments on the pages, you know, share it with your friends and family. We really appreciate the support that we've gotten in just the last couple months. It's become something way more than I imagined that it would be. And I'm just blessed to be able to come across really cool guests and really cool people like Tom. So Tom, thank you so much for your time and take care.
My pleasure. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you so much for listening to Self-Made and Sober. Be sure to join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/SMC Mastermind, like Self-Made Coaching Mastermind. I hope you enjoyed the show, and be sure to subscribe and rate the show so you can get notified each Friday when we put out a new episode.